Good afternoon, everybody. Keith Engel here for TGI Sports Talks. MLB update. God, I keep forgetting what show I'm doing. MLB update. I'll be joined by my current, or I should say, what's the word I want? Often our guest host, Drew Ehrlich, will be joined in just a second. We're going to get into all the news of the day. We'll get into the MLB award winners, the MLB managers carousel. Only one team left without a manager. We'll get into that and maybe some other things. I want to welcome everybody watching TGI Sports Talk, of course, Facebook or YouTube. Northeast Streaming Sports. We're also live on YouTube and Facebook, and also the show airs live on the Roku, the Northeast Streaming Sports Roku channel, which you can download for free on Roku. So take a look at that. A lot of great program, as I said. I think 47, 48 unique shows now we're up to there. So great stuff going on there. You can catch also the College Football Huddle, which I did live Wednesday night on Facebook and YouTube. Will also be replayed tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. on Roku there. And, of course, Let's Talk Sports on YouTube specifically, and a lot of great content there, as I keep saying. That's our Dan Harris connection, and thumbs up DDH. You're with us all the time. And again, a lot of great shows over there. And a quick shout out to Ralph Wilson. Now I lost my little Ralph Wilson update. RW Media, don't forget, and specifically the Sports Corner, which he does with Smoke and Jim Frazier. And let's see if I can get this right. It's on WBVP in Pittsburgh, Tuesdays at 5:30. I won't give you the call letters because I'm going to mess them up. And there it is right here. That's on 12:30 a.m. and 99.3 FM. Ralph's a good guy. Lots of great stuff on his shows. Not just the Sports Corner, but lots of good media from RW Medias. So great to have you guys with us. Real quick, let me see who's is with us. If at the moment, there's Dave Guyette. Good afternoon, Dave. How are you? Good to have you with us up there in Johnstown, New York. And I'm going to bring in, without further ado, our special guest host, Drew Ehrlich. How are you, Drew?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back on, Keith. Ooh, that didn't sound good.
Applause for you. I thought I'd fool around a little today.
Okay.
That well. I never play with my soundboard. Today I got playing with it. I'm like, I'm going to start using some sound effects here. Anyway, how are you, Drew? It's been a couple weeks since we've been on, and since we last talked, there's been some managerial fillings, which were fillings? Filled. Sounds better.
It's like going to the dentist.
Yeah, I don't need any managers in my mouth, that's for sure. So we'll talk about that. We'll get into the award winners, but I want to jump into the news of the day. And while I pull that up, what's the top of your mind about Major League Baseball? What really strikes you today as we talk about MLB?
Well, how predictable the off-season awards were. I mean, there was only one surprise to me at all.
A lot of, and we'll go through them all, but a lot of unanimous selections, which is not usual. And we'll talk about whether we agree, disagree. There's a couple things. Listen, I get it. Ohtani's a great player. I don't want to get into it now. We'll get into it then. But I just feel like winners deserve the MVP more than losers. Sorry. No offense to you, Mr. Ohtani. Maybe you look good in pinstripes, but since that's not going to happen, maybe I will dish you a little bit. So we'll get into all that. Big news. I think the biggest news is the owners have finally green-lighted the A's move to Vegas unanimously. And whether this is a good move or a bad move, who knows? I mean, the Raiders aren't doing so good there, but they're drawing people. Oakland loses a team. I've said this for a while, and I'd like to get your take on it. You got to support your team. I understand it's not a great stadium. It's not a great venue to go watch baseball. Nor was it for football, I suppose. But if you don't support your team, you're going to lose your team. That's all there is to it. And the A's, or Oakland, has had a great history of supporting this team. They've had good teams, maybe not winning teams often in the 2000s here. The last few years notwithstanding, they had some really good baseball teams. Even back to the 70s when they were winning 3 straight World Series, they really didn't support this team. I mean, they come out for the playoffs and big series, but there was often nights there was 4,000 or 5,000 people in the stadium for a World Series winning team. And it's amazing to me they've kept the team as long as they have.
I agree with you. I mean, they've never had the support. They're essentially the Tampa Rays.
Yeah.
Same issue. Good teams at times. And the fans don't come out. And then when they're leaving, oh my God, you're leaving. You can't do that to us. This is terrible. And I'm like, okay. And of course, the government people were taking their cue from the fans because they didn't try very hard to keep them. Every time something came up, they deep sixed it. So, like, okay, well, that's because no one's supporting, the fans aren't supporting it. And we're like, okay, well, then they leave.
If you want a better stadium, you should show up to the old one, in my mind. And it's interesting you bring up the Rays. I was going to mention, before we finished up this conversation about them moving, let this be a cautionary tale to you fans in Tampa. Start showing up, or your team's going to be somewhere else. And you got a good organization there, and you ought to be supportive.
Well, Tampa actually, I believe, has a new deal in place for a new stadium. Finally.
Is it a done deal though?
Nothing's ever a done deal till they start breaking ground, but it's pretty certain at this point.
Well, hopefully for them that will work, and please show up. The Marlins built a new stadium, and people didn't necessarily show up there either. That's another example of, I don't know what their attendance was this year with a playoff team, but I don't think it was way over the top. So a new stadium, doesn't always cure all the ills.
No, it doesn't. And again, baseball itself has often gotten overpriced, between the parking and the tickets and the refreshments and everything else. They're trying to pay for all the salaries, and you're like, you're leaving out some people.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. That's it is an expensive proposition to go to a ball game. I don't know how you do it if you got 2 or 3 kids you're trying to take with you. And I mean, I have some people that I know. In fact, somebody who works for me, but they travel. They have the last 3 years they've taken their kids and they travel around the country, and their goals go to every stadium, and each year they've gone to like 5 or 6 different spots during their trip, and it's an expensive proposition, man. That's not cheap.
Nope.
So, and some places are cheaper than others. I mean, you can get into a Rocky game pretty cheap these days. I'll tell you right now.
True enough.
Elsewhere, I'll get to the trade last here. I want to go through a couple other news. MLB, who's again trying to follow the NFL's plan, I guess, for games overseas. They had planned some games in Paris in 29, or 25, and that's been canceled. So I don't know about, Jesus. Here's the other thing. You take games away from teams at their stadiums, and I'm not a big fan of this travel, and I think it hurts the teams up more than it helps them.
Well, I understand they're trying to grow the brand, if you will, and it's worked well for the NFL. A couple of years back, they did it in Japan, which is a hotbed for baseball, so that made sense.
Yeah.
Although if you were the home team, that would piss you off because you're not much of a home team.
Well, yeah, you've lost 3 home games or 4 home games, right?
Yeah, but at least that made sense. Anywhere else, I don't know. And Paris has been problematic anyway, politically. Anything could blow up at any time. And then you've got the Olympics there and everything else. So
we're really going to, with the WBC, which I really like, by the way. I mean, I know we're trying to grow the game globally, but if playing 3 Major League Baseball games in Paris, or where'd they play last year? They played in, wasn't Germany, was it? It was someplace that was maybe it was London. Maybe it was in England. I know they played 3 games over there somewhere for the first time in a couple of years, and it was, are we really going to grow interest in Major League Baseball over there? I don't think we are.
I think they're trying to piggyback on the WBC, and it has been somewhat successful. I'm just not sure it's going to work like the NFL does. But
no, I don't think it's going to have the same kind of effect, and we'll see. We're going to get into David Cole.
David Cole.
Oh my God, Cole definitely deserves the Cy Young. We'll get into that in just a little bit, Dave, for sure. That'll be our next move here. Elsewhere, the Braves get Atlanta, I should say, gets the 25 All-Star game after losing in 21. One big piece of advice, Rob Manfred: stay out of politics. Baseball, stay out of politics. I mean, you created a firestorm that you didn't need to do in 21, so don't do that. So I'm glad the Braves get this game back. If anybody even cares about the All-Star game anymore, by the way. I barely pay
valid
attention.
point.
What else? And then we had a trade in Major League Baseball. The Braves trade 5 players, a former runner-up for the Rookie of the Year in Soroka. They trade 5 players for a relief pitcher who would middle of the road at best. Was he 5-5 with about a 6 ERA last year? So what were the details of this trade here?
Included Jared Schuster, too.
They did trade left-hander Jared Schuster, shortstop Brandon Shoemake. I said Shoemake. Infielder Nicky Lopez and right-hander Riley Gowans, along with the aforementioned Soroka, who has had a lot of arm problems and injury issues since he was a runner-up to Pete Alonso. Who was a runner-up? Pete Alonso, I think he was, wasn't he? The runner-up?
I believe so.
They traded him for Aaron Bummer, left-handed relief pitcher. Again, this is a funny-looking trade. I mean, I don't know. Do they love any of these guys they gave up? Schuster was fairly highly ranked, I think, at least one time. So, you know, we're going to have a lot more trades, obviously, this winter, but this kicks it off. Any thoughts?
Lots of thoughts. Someone will look at this and go, is this guy really that good? And the answer is no. He was decent 2 years. He was decent 2 years. He was actually very good 2 years ago. Worth 5 players? There's actually a lot of things going on with this one, way more than the Quantrill trade. First off, the White Sox have holes all over the field. So they needed a veteran presence at shortstop. They lost Anderson. Nicky Lopez will take care of that. You know, he's not a great hitter, but he has his moments, and he's a great fielder. And the biggest thing for them, I think, is that he's a great person in the clubhouse. And they're looking to replace a lot of their veterans that they lost. So there's one thing. Several other things. You got people on contracts coming up, people that would have been non-tendered anyway, so let's see what you can get. They're also clearing out room on their 40-man roster because if you're not really going to move these guys up, then cleaning out your 40-man roster allows you to put more of your minor leaguers on there and protect them from the Rule 5 draft. So that's a factor in there. So there's actually a lot of things going on administratively behind the scenes that this looks really lopsided, but there's actually technical reasons why it makes sense. Well,
Rick, to your comment here, Drew spoke very highly kind of all 5 of these guys, so I would write these guys down definitely as guys you want to pick in the draft next year. And
I don't know about that.
And I would go up because it sounds like Drew might pick them for you if you do not. So just a little bit aside.
We did okay for him last year.
You did very well for him, yes. I hope he gave you part of his winnings. Oh, yeah. It's a free league, so you got nothing.
I got all of his winnings, yeah.
Right, you got 100% of the winnings. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have. As you should, actually. So from there, any other news that I don't have any other news, really breaking news anyway, to chat about? Anything maybe that's come up, and besides the stuff we're going to get into with the awards and the managers' moves?
Cal Quantrill was another a trade, and again, you're going to see, as I just said, you're going to see a lot of trades clearing space, trying to fill holes, non-tendering, 40-man roster. You're going to see a lot of this stuff early before you start to see the really big trades with consequential players. So these guys are just adjusting their rosters at this point. That's what that's about. Right. Quantrill was a surprise. It was going to be a surprise, actually, that he was going to be non-tendered from the get-go. So for the Rockies to pick him up, it doesn't cost them much. And if he actually rebounds well, he didn't do well until like the last 3 outings he had this year. And he's been injured, which is another thing. But maybe they could catch lightning in a bottle. It didn't cost them a lot. How's he going to do in Colorado? That's a whole question. But this was a surprise in the first place, and for them to get it looks good for them.
Yeah, I think it's more than just a filler move. I think it might have some impact next year.
Good.
Let's go through. So Dave wanted to talk about award winners. We're going to go right down the list here. So when we get to Cole, we'll get them. We're going to start with the MVP awards. Both runaways. So Ohtani wins it easily in the American League, and Acuna wins it easily, which is that one's certainly no shock. Neither one should be a shock, I suppose, to anybody. Ohtani finishes quite a ways ahead of Corey Seager, gets all the first place votes. To me, and I think Simeon and Seager probably hurt themselves. They split a lot of they got a lot of votes between them. They finished second and third. I'll be honest with you. I would have supported Seager. Well, he missed some time, but I would have supported him over Ohtani in this spot only because the ball club's a winning ball club, and Ohtani, as great as he is, didn't contribute to any success.
Yeah, I know that's a stickler for you. I'm not as wedded to the you have to come from a winning team. It makes sense that a lot of them would, simply because that's how they got to be winners, is right. Frequently with these people. But I don't have a problem with someone just having a hell of a year and getting the award. Now, does it fly in the face of what the name of the award is? Maybe a little. Maybe a little. That's not necessarily how most people interpret the award, though. They basically interpret it as the best player for the year. It's a misnomer at this point to call it most valuable player. But
it is, and I've said for years I think they should add a player of the year and then have an MVP. Because the Cy Young is very obvious. It's the best pitcher. I don't care where he pitches. It doesn't matter if he pitches on a winner or not to me. But the most valuable player, I remember when Andre Dawson won it when the Cubs finished last, and I'm like, great year, Andre, but what did it accomplish for your team? So
yeah. I think Steve Carlton would have deserved it that one year. He won 54% of all their wins. Yeah, there's the most valuable player.
They would have won about 30 games without him on that team. So
right. And notice, by the way, that they do not call it most valuable pitcher.
No, right. Cy Young. It's obviously the best pitcher. We know that. So I don't know. Acuna, there's obviously I have no issue with Acuna winning this award. He had a record-setting year, a year like nobody's. Listen, guys like Mays and whatnot have had great years, but he did things nobody'd ever done before. So I obviously am not going to argue with this pick. Finish behind him here.
Betts and Freeman.
Year. Yeah, Betts and Freeman, great years, but again, there's no way. Again, he plays for a winner, and I don't have any problem here for sure. Any thoughts on either? Any thoughts from you on either one of these?
40-70. That's all you need to know. For crying out loud, and this is after a major injury. Fabulous.
Funny, you sent me the, and I haven't read that article that you sent me yet. I've opened it up a couple times, and I get distracted. But overall, we obviously had the change in the rules to the change in the size of the bases, which obviously shortens the base path as well. It's no longer 90 feet. Plus the change in the rules that you can only throw over there twice, which I've got to believe contributes to, obviously, I think the success rate this year was 80%, which I think is the highest ever, the record. and to me, it makes perfect sense that you would have a record this year because once I've thrown over there twice, I can probably walk to second base. There's no way you're going to get me. So, great year, and I don't want to take away from Acuna. I don't know if he'll ever do this again. This is just a tremendous year.
He's going to shoot for 50-50, he said.
Yeah, but that's a good goal to go for sure. He'd be the first 50-50 guy for sure. I remember when it was a big deal when you went 30 for 30. Bobby Bonds did it like 5 times, I believe. So then it became an old hat for him. So we had to start looking for 40-40 guys. Now we got to wait for 50-50 guys. So
yep.
But and he stayed healthy pretty much too this year, which was huge. Obviously, to being able to accumulate those numbers and certainly help his team win here. Getting to the Cy Young, where Dave was. I got a comment here. So what's he say? Regular season champion and participation trophy. Thank you, Rick. That's how I feel about that. And here we'll get to Dave's comment here. Cy Young, obviously Garrett Cole, another unanimous vote here. Wins over second place Sonny Gray. Kevin Gausman finishes third. Cole, pitching on a mediocre team at best. Had just a tremendous year, and we can't look at wins as much as we used to with pitchers just because of the way the game's played today. But I mean, across the board, he was pretty much dominant all year long, and the best player on this team this year anyway, by far, I think.
Yeah, no question. I mean, this was a no-brainer. As I said, I didn't find any of the picks surprising. They were all telegraphed way back when. Yeah. The only one was one of the managers.
Well, sticking with the Cy Young award, I'm not surprised Blake Snell won. I'm a little surprised at the gap. Because I didn't think the difference between him and some of the guys we talked about a couple of weeks ago, Logan Webb, who I didn't even think about that much. I think you might have mentioned Webb, Zach Gallen, and Spencer Strider specifically. I didn't think the gap was as big as what the voting was. But congratulations, Blake Snell deserved the award. I was just a little surprised at that the gap here.
I agree with you. And again, unlike Cole, whose numbers across the board, I mean, Snell was fantastic. No question about it. Except when you look at his control. I mean, this guy walked 5 players per 9.
Yeah.
Every time he went out. So, why is he getting so many strikeouts? Because people are bailing out from the plate because they don't know if they're going to get hit, which is effective. I mean, there have been pitchers that do it, but were his numbers like Cole's? No. Cole has control, so it wasn't as good, and it almost. I mean, he came close to unanimous. I think what was it? Only 4 other first place votes.
I think 2. He had 28 votes. 28
2.
Coach, yeah.
I'm like, okay, I agree with you. If the guy had the control, I'd go, okay, I get it. But that irks me a little bit. That's almost like the 3 true outcome guys winning MVPs. I'm like, okay, come on. I'm glad you got the ERA, which also is out of your hands to some degree, depending upon how good your fielders are. Mm-hmm. Glad you got the strikeouts. Everything looks good. But if you don't know where the ball's going, come on.
Yeah, that does put your team in jeopardy. You got to throw the ball over the plate, definitely. So, but congratulations again. That was a well-deserved award. So, let's see, where am I next? I lost my list here.
Yeah, Rookie of the Year.
Come on, where'd you go? There you go. Manager of the Year. I got next up.
Okay.
Brandon Hyde wins over Bruce Bochy. I mean, I thought Bochy would get more votes. To be honest with you, no disrespect to Brandon Hyde. Great job in Baltimore the last couple years. Wins 100 games with a team that was losing 100 games a year just a couple of seasons ago or close to it. But I thought Bochy might be a little bit closer here.
I agree. But I had no quibble with Hyde. We talked about potential winners, and we mentioned Hyde.
Yeah.
And again, everyone has to remember this is a vote taken before the playoffs.
Correct.
So,
yeah, I think if this vote was taken after the playoffs, Bochy wins this award. I really do. So, And again, that brings up another thing before we go on. I really believe, especially manager of the year, it should be through the postseason. I really do. Maybe not the MVP. I get it, but I think manager of the year at least should go through the playoffs.
It's problematic only because if you do that, then you got to do it for everybody. So,
I suppose. Probably the one you thought was a little bit of a surprise, and the surprise to me is Skip Schumacher winning in Miami. Great job. I mean, certainly probably deserving the award, but I really thought either Council or Lavello or even Schnitker from the Braves would win this. Problem with the Schnitker, it's always hard to win when you got the team that's expected to win, right? So, but these guys, Schnitker's done a great job there for years now, and is deserving here. What would you? I probably would have given this to Torey Lavello, to be honest with you.
He's certainly up there, but I actually had a favorite for, and that was our buddy at the Dodgers. I mean,
Ray Roberts, yeah.
To deal with what Roberts had to deal with that pitching staff and still end up running away with the division the way he did. I mean, granted, Mookie and Freeman saved his butt.
Actually, I did talk him up for this award a lot during the course of this show during the year, because there's a lot of haters out there of the Dodgers. Well, one I can think of particularly, who just hates Dave Roberts and everything to do with the Dodgers. And how Dave Roberts could ever be accused of not doing a good job this year is amazing to me, with the injuries they had to deal with, as you said, a lot of situations to deal with. So he should have been higher up here. Again, if this award is given after the playoffs, Lavello probably does much better and might even win the award.
Yep, I agree.
Now we move on to the Rookie of the Years. No big surprise there. I don't think in either league. Gunnar Henderson wins for the Orioles. Got off to a bit of a slow start this year, but once he got going, man, he's going to be a great baseball name too, Gunnar. Anybody with a name like Gunnar, come on, he's got to be winning a lot of awards. This is unanimous. Both of these awards were unanimous, and I've got no issue. There's not a name on this list that I would say you could even consider above Henderson here.
Agreed. And again, no surprises here. Well deserved. It was telegraphed literally a month before they even voted on these things who was probably going to win it. As well they should. Henderson's slow start sort of depressed his batting average a little bit, so it doesn't look as good as it could have. But everything else is in place, and he's a fabulous fielder. Everyone is used to him at third base. He came up as a shortstop.
Right.
But they've got another shortstop coming up, believe it or not. So
the Orioles are going to get better and better.
Yeah.
And both these winners, we'll move on to the National League. Corbin Carroll wins there, again unanimous. Both of these guys were pretty highly rated to win this award in the preseason, so this isn't a surprise here at all. Senga from the Mets finishes second, which is a nice finish for him. He had a very nice season for the Mets this year, and one of the bright spots on an otherwise dark season for the Mets. And the Reds get three guys in the voting here. None of them probably played. Well, the McLean might have started the season. I'm not sure. Did they all come up during the season? I think they did.
Yes. McLean didn't start from spring training.
Which always hurts. I mean, again, one of these guys might have won the award if they'd actually played the entire season. So,
well, you can still win the award even if you come up in May. I think their biggest issue was the same issue that Sager and Semien had, is they split the votes because there were so many of them.
Yeah, agreed. I think didn't somebody? I want to say like Greg Jeffries years ago won it. I think he was only up for about 6 weeks. In fact, he still was eligible for the award the next year, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about misremembering this a little bit, but at least somebody has won the Rookie of the Year award and still been eligible for it the next year.
Willie McCovey was up there. I think he had very few at bats.
McCovey might have been a guy too. Yeah. So anyway, no big surprises here at all. We haven't had the one that we don't have yet is Comeback Player of the Year has not been announced yet. And we'll bring that to you guys when we know it. And what do you got here, Dave Gayette? Only prediction that might be in Major League Baseball this offseason. Well, it's going to depend. I think I don't think there's going to be a lot of big trades until some of the big free agents start to land wherever they're going to land. If you're going to look for a big trade, I think my number one guy to watch would be Pete Alonso. I don't know what your thoughts about that. I really think the Mets are going to move on from Alonso. I don't think they're going to pay him because you talked about he's Dave Kingman. He's Dave Kingman, and he's the three true outcome guy.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue with him is his new agent. Although for the first time in modern memory, Boris is actually talking about negotiating earlier than usual, which I think is an Alonso thing of, hey, I'd really like to stay in New York, Scott. Can you see what you can do here? It's still probably going to be too much. And again, he walks, he hits home runs, which obviously drives in runs. Never hits for average. Well, doesn't steal any bases. Decent fielder, not any Gold Glove material. So, is he gonna? How much are home runs worth? And could they just trade for somebody at first base that gets them half, 2/3 of the home runs, but increased average and that sort of thing? He could. I actually think Soto is going to be traded. The Padres are trying to cut salary.
And I'm going to say to Brian Cashman right now, please do not trade for Juan Soto because he can't play in the outfield. He can't play left field in Yankee Stadium, I can tell you right now. And there's no place else for him to play as long as Stanton is on his team. So do not trade for Juan Soto, please.
Oh, you want to address the Cashman uproar over Stanton?
He didn't need to say it. We all know it. Stanton said it himself during the year that I need to be on the field. I can't keep getting hurt. I don't know why Stanton Cashman had to bring it up. I mean, I had a bigger issue with Stanton. I keep saying Stanton. Cashman sitting there and talking about how this is a good baseball team. That I'm sorry, you're 82-80, and you weren't. It wasn't even that good. And by the way, you were also a boring baseball team. And one thing you can't be is bad and boring, and both New York teams were that this year in my mind.
Oh yeah. I mean, it wasn't pretty.
Hal Steinbrenner, these guys just don't get what's going on. And why can't Cashman sit there in that press conference and say, you know what? I'd like to hear this just one time. I got to do a better job. How about that? Because you put this mess together year after year.
Yeah, but then you're giving the owner an idea. You don't want to do that. So.
Yeah, I agree, and I know Dave Gayette will say any second fire Cashman and Boone. So I'm pretty sure we'll see that come up here pretty soon. To
Dave's question, as you said, 100% what you said. They have to see how some of the free agents fall out. Because you need to know if you're going to have a replacement so that you could then trade somebody.
Agreed.
Biggest thing in the trade market's going to be pitching, though.
This is a great question. Dusty Baker is absolutely Hall of Fame material. If Dusty Baker does not make the Hall of Fame, it will be a travesty. I know he's got one World Series victory, but he's been there a couple times. He led some great teams in San Francisco who just didn't get over the top. Missed the playoffs one year when he won 100 games. So I think he's had a look at career baseball, man. When you factor everything in, and I know they won't do that. They don't factor in your playing career and your managerial career together. Maybe they do if you get to the veterans vote or whatever we call that now. But he's certainly not a Hall of Fame player. He's a very good player. But he was a very good manager, great manager. He turned a lot of teams' fortunes around. And the knock on him was he couldn't win the big one, and he'd wear out pitching staffs. A lot of knocks on Dusty, but I'm so happy he got his World Series last year. I like Dusty, and definitely Hall of Fame.
Yeah, don't forget the other knock. He only plays veterans over the young people. Was another one of his knocks.
Well, for veterans, that's who I'm playing too.
Well, but that wasn't entirely true either, particularly with the one that he won with. So, yeah, he's you look at his history, and he really didn't do a bad job anywhere. He may not have had the World Series, but again, he's not on the field. I mean, he's pulling the levers, he's making the moves, he's doing what he can, and I think he should get in.
Absolutely. And he's also, it's not his fault Bartman was in the stadium that night in Chicago. But for Bartman, Dusty Baker might be the most revered guy in Chicago because that team was really good. And they may have won the World Series that year if that thing hadn't just totally dismantled them.
That had nothing to do with Bartman. They blew it after that. I mean, they could have closed it out after the Bartman play, and they didn't. So
they could have, but I really believe, and again, maybe it's a knock on the manager a little bit too. But the team was rattled after that for sure. And again, that was a really good baseball team, and it'll be forgotten forever. I think that's the year the Marlins. That was 2003, wasn't it? When the Marlins beat the Yankees.
Yep.
That was a Marlins team that was really an underdog in that postseason. So,
yep. Oh, Rick says you're getting feedbacks.
Am I getting feedback? I'm trying to.
I'm not hearing it, but
I keep playing with these settings. That's why I'm trying to keep you. How's that, Rick? We'll get some from time to time. It's all right. We'll live with it. Sorry, Rick. We'll do our best. I promise. Any other
electronics
from your end?
No, they pretty much went as we expected, except for the Schumacher pick, I think.
Let's move on to the managers. Lots of stuff, and I want to get into a couple of different topics here. Obviously, there's one job left. We've got quite a mix of some young newcomers, very young newcomers in votes case. You got a couple of veterans that have moved on to new jobs from jobs they had last year, and you've got a guy who hasn't managed in a while, did a really good job, and has gotten a second chance at 71 years old, and I think a well-deserved second chance at that. So I think it's quite a mixture of hires here this year with one to come. I want to start with Craig Counsell, which we talked about here, that the dominoes would start to fall once he signed, and they fell pretty quickly. I think, listen, I lost a lot of respect, to be honest with you, for Craig Counsell during this whole thing for a couple of reasons. I think he negotiated with his friend David Stearns with no intention of ever signing with the Mets, and he used the Mets. And he used the Mets to get a job that one of his brethren already had. And there used to be a time where guys would not consider talking about a job, or much less taking a job, that somebody else already held. And David Ross was very diplomatic about his dismissal. Maybe David Ross wasn't the best manager in the world, but he probably deserved a better fate than to find out he'd been fired after they hired a new guy. And this was all about, he made it very clear, not all about, but he made it very clear he wanted to become the highest paid manager ever to help other managers, theoretically. Well, ironically, I get to help myself when I do that. And he's a good manager. I like Craig Counsell, but I don't see those World Series trophies that weren't, $40 million over 5 years. Or is it, I think I got that number right. What do you thought about the whole process and how it all went down?
I wasn't happy with it. We knew he was trying to set the market. The irony is, Milwaukee had already offered him $5 million, which would have set the market. So they had already made him the highest paid manager with their offer. We can assume that his work with Stearns was to go above that, saying, hey, I've got this from Milwaukee. What can you do? But if you read between the lines, everything that I read said he really did not want to leave his home. He's a big family guy. He likes going to his kids' games. And there's really only two teams within an hour of his home, and that's Milwaukee and Chicago.
Big Cubs fan growing
maybe
up.
Minnesota.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, when it came down, I was surprised and I wasn't surprised. I was surprised at the money. I think that was an overpayment. Um, I wasn't surprised that it was Chicago because it's an hour away from his house. So, and how that went down, if you didn't like the job that Ross did, then fire him. But they weren't going to because everyone thought he did a fabulous job with a team that wasn't supposed to contend, which it did until the last 2 weeks. And, now it's like, oh, wait, we can get this name brand manager. Let's kick you to the curb. And now it's too late for him to hook up with another team because all the other teams, the dominoes fell so quickly because they all had contingency plans. No one could consider Ross, although he could officially being considered for the Padres, I suppose. But I wasn't thrilled with how it went down, either the money involved or how they treated Ross. I mean, the surprise element was because teams could not contact people without making it public until a certain date. Right. That's why no one heard about the Chicago offer. As soon as that date came, they jumped in. There's a whole administrative thing that goes into that. But yeah, I agree with you. I wasn't thrilled with how it went down or even why it went down to some degree.
Yeah, I kind of agree and I lost a little respect for him and his management team. David Ross, again, by all accounts, very well respected by his players. If there was a knock against him, I guess from what I've read, is that a lot of the in-game strategy was handled by Andy Green, the bench coach. But listen, I mean, there's a lot of teams that the bench coach is handling a lot of that stuff too. So how much of that is true, I don't know. I know that he did a great job with a very dysfunctional Cubs team this year in my mind. So.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Keep in mind, Ross had managed before. So who do you put as a bench coach? Someone that has the experience. Yeah. Voigt's going to have that same issue in Cleveland. So you can't blame him that he's relying on someone else. I mean, it's still his call. He could say, "Nah, I don't agree with you, Andy. I think I'm going to go this way," and that's fine. And Ross would have owned it because that's the kind of guy he is. But yeah, I don't think that's a knock that's legitimate.
Well, to stay kind of in the same vein here, because the Brewers and Cubs series are going to get much more interesting, I think, this year, as Pat Murphy, his bench coach, was named the Brewers manager recently too. He's a young guy, never had a manager's job before. Notre Dame grad. I don't know if he coached at Notre Dame or not, but I know he played at Notre Dame, and I think he'd been with the Brewers throughout Council's tenure there. So it's going to be very interesting. These two teams, again, not a traditional huge rivalry like maybe the Cubs and Cardinals, but they've become quite a rival more recently as they've both been better teams. So it'll be an interesting dynamic between these two teams when they play this year.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see which teams go outside to try to inject something and which teams say, you know what, we've got a good thing going here. Let's just keep it going with the personnel we have. Milwaukee did that. Houston did that. So it's interesting to see the different takes that the teams are taking. Murphy actually is 64. And I could be wrong, but I could swear I read somewhere that he was actually Council's coach.
Oh, he was. That's true. That's absolutely right. Yes, he was.
Yeah, in college. And so, I mean, there was a connection here to Council, which is ironic at this point. But and he's obviously older than Council then. But at the same time, Milwaukee being a small market team, it makes sense that they want to keep the philosophy the same and you go internally. And that's what they did.
And the smallest market in baseball, actually, the Milwaukee Brewers. So they did a great job. All of the management, since David Stearns was there and brought in Craig Counsell and some other people, they've done a great job of making his team competitive. It's going to be very hard for them to get over the top, though, with the restrictions that they have financially. And I'm sure that Craig Counsell is excited to be, getting someplace with more resources. So we'll see
with a pocketbook. Yeah.
Right. And Rick, real quick before we move on, I do appreciate anybody letting me know when we have those technical issues. So thank you for that.
Hey, I'm just noticing you're apparently a wit. You're not a whiff. You're a wit.
Well, that's the way we talk in Perth with Angle, and I went to school with Rick Sherlock and those guys. So
Fair enough.
Here and there, it makes it much. I'm just trying to save time when I'm writing. Thank you for pointing.
I find you witty anyway, so we're okay.
Thank you. Sticking with the guys who managed last year, Bob Melvin, that moves on from, who did a great job in Oakland. We talked a little bit about some of those A's teams, and a big part of that more recent success was Bob Melvin for sure. Been around a long time. He's managed. I think this will be his. I think it's his fourth stop. No, he managed I said the A's. He managed the Mariners and somebody else. I can't think who it was besides the Padres. With pretty good success most of the time. I think this is a good fit for the Giants. I think he'd had enough of the Padres dysfunction there, and our condolences to the Padres organization with their owner passing away here the last few days too. But I think Melvin had enough of what was going on there and didn't see things improving much. So I think it's a good fit for him to go there and get a chance to kind of, put together a better team out there in San Francisco. And I will say this, we're not going to be getting into our free agent predictions necessarily today, but I'm going to say it loud and proud. You heard it here first. Ohtani signs in San Francisco. Watch them. Everybody's got the Dodgers in mind, the Mariners in mind. Watch out for San Francisco.
Yeah, it's possible.
Yeah.
I mean, when it comes to the Asian players, there tends to be two factors that enter in. There's always a bias towards the West Coast because it's a lot closer to home. That's a given. Mm-hmm. They also like going to teams that have someone that they're familiar with from their previous leagues. So the Mets, for example, are in the running for Yamamoto because of Senga. The Red Sox are in the running because of their guys. So, those tend to be the two factors. So certainly San Francisco being on the West Coast makes them, a viable possibility. And remember, they were going after Judge. They wanted a big splash. And, they tried Judge, they tried Korea. Neither panned out. They still got the money to spend. So
they're willing to spend. And that's why I really believe that's a good, and I think it's a good fit. I really do. We'll see how that. By the way, you mentioned Yamamoto. Was that how you think? So Yamamoto, we were talking about Cashman before, and one thing that we didn't touch on coming out of this press conference is ripping Stanton. Stanton's agent also represents Yamamoto, and his agent said afterwards, saying, this is one of the reasons that free agents, both domestic and foreign, might shy away from the Yankees because of this type of stuff. So he didn't need to say what he said.
Nope, that's an oops.
We all know the situation. I mean, why point it out further? Anyway, so I regress anyway.
Yep. But getting back to Melvin, I think the surprise here wasn't so much that the Giants picked him up. He's a good fit, especially in light of Kapler. I mean, he's totally 180 degrees there. But that San Diego pretty much admitted that, this isn't a good fit. You want out, we'll let you go. I mean, It was such a big deal that they brought him on, and now it's like, yeah, okay, get lost. And I thought that was interesting.
Let's talk about a couple of the young guys before I go to the old guy. Who do we have here? The Indians, as we talked about, brought in. I heard his name was Vogt. I heard you say Voigt. I'm not sure which way it goes, but either way, this is a guy. I believe only 1 year of coaching. I think he just retired in 2020. 22, if I'm not mistaken.
2, yes. Yep.
Really heady player. Was a catcher. I know he played with the Giants, and I think he played with the Mariners as well. Interesting hire by the Guardians. I'm sure, as you said, he's going to have to bring in some experience there. But it's not often you see a guy 1 year out of his playing career getting a shot like this.
No, that it was surprising. I mean, it had been rumored, so it wasn't totally surprising. It's surprising on 2 levels. Number one, you're replacing Francona, who's a baseball lifer, with this guy who's been retired for 1 year and a few months. So he's got a great reputation. Everywhere he went, they loved him in the clubhouse. He talked to all players, treated everyone equally. I mean, he was never a star, so he made his mark by being one of those guys in the clubhouse. Great communicator, supposedly. It's 1 year. It's like voting for a guy for president that's been a senator for 6 months. You're like, okay.
We tried that, by the way. I remember that.
It's like, okay, it may work out, and I'm hoping it does. But on the face of it, you're like, I'd like someone with a little more experience, But here, again, as in politics, you surround yourself with good people, and it may come out okay. So he's going to get the chance to fill out his staff and have people that'll support him and teach him as he goes.
He gets a team with some good young talent with a very good chance to, I think, bounce back next year.
He does. I mean, they always have the hitting issue. Pitching's never been their issue. I mean, here they're releasing Quantrill and don't have any qualms about it. So, yeah, I mean, the guy's going to have to make it. He's pretty much in the same boat Ross was.
Yeah.
At this point. And also note, and this is historically for century plus, catchers tend to always make decent managers because they are the field generals of a team.
C1 Bruce Bochy, right? So absolutely good call. That's a good call, and it's a very true thing too. Speaking of young, I don't know how young Mendoza is, but he hasn't got a lot of experience as a manager. The Mets fire a very experienced manager to chase another experienced manager and end up with a bench coach from across town. Now, he knows how to handle New York, at least from a coaching standpoint. That's a little different than sitting in the main chair. I was a little surprised that they went this direction myself. And by the way, when I said it went from one experienced manager, don't be fooled. The Mets fired Buck Showalter. I had this discussion with the Mad New Yorker this morning. I don't care if he said he resigned. A lot of guys resign that are actually fired, and Buck Showalter was fired. No,
yes, he was. And then so they went from him to council, and now they, not that long ago, there was no such thing as a bench coach. You had your first base, your third base, your pitching coach, your hitting coach, and that was it. Now we got a
first guy I remember with the job. To be honest with you, Don Zimmer's the first guy I remember with that job.
Yep, and that started the trend, and that's fine. And you don't have to, when you're that involved in making game decisions day in, day out. The fact that you haven't coached Major League, I should comment that Mendoza has managed
yes.
At other levels. But that you're a bench coach and you're involved day to day, every game, making decisions, giving input, seeing how they turned out. It's not unusual that bench coach tends to be the stepping stone if you haven't had Major League managerial experience to a managerial job.
A tough,
Espada was the same deal.
Yeah, tough spot to be.
Murphy was the same deal.
Very tough spot to be jumping into here, though, for Mendoza without Major League managerial experience to go into this cauldron of the Mets. They can talk about punting 24 all they want, as long as their owner's their owner. A lot's going to be expected of this team, and they better not finish 75 and 87 again. I can tell you that right now. So,
Yeah. And speaking of trades, I expect you to see some trades from the Mets.
oh, I would as well. I mentioned Alonso. I do think he'll go, but don't think by any means he'll be the only guy for sure.
No.
Joe Espada, no surprise there. He was the front runner, the rumored front runner all along, although they did interview other candidates. He was the bench coach for Dusty Baker. He moves up, and I think that's a good move for the Astros. Continuity. Why bring anybody in to make waves with a team that's still a major contender for a title next year, I would say.
Yeah, and again, they did it, and Milwaukee did it. Other people brought in someone from the outside, but they were the two that kept the, what do you want to call it, the integrity of the way. We have a way of doing things. We have a way of administrating, of managing, of handling players. Let's just keep it going. And those were the two teams that did it. And you got small market and you got big market there, which is interesting.
Yeah, good point. And lastly, because Padres haven't hired anybody yet, Ron Washington, who did a great job in Texas, getting them to back-to-back World Series, not winning one, kind of chased out of Texas as their fortunes started to fall, and there were some rumors of off-the-field situations, both domestically and maybe with other things. Again, we don't have to dive into that. Whatever, he's always been he's a baseball lifer. People love him. That he went to the Braves, and every single guy, especially the infielders on the Braves, who are all pretty good fielders, by the way, contribute a lot of their success to Ron Washington, and he's very respected within the game. I thought he would have got a second shot before this. I think some of those issues might have held him back. Rumored issues, anyway, might have held him back. But it's interesting that he gets his second shot at 71 years old, and not a great situation he's going into. So I'm not sure he's going to be happy he got the second shot, but I'm happy that he's got a job and he wants the job. So we'll see how it works out for him.
Yeah, he's wanted a job for a while. Once he did his mea culpas, he kept hoping that he would get it. He's supposedly a fielding whiz. There's not an infielder, and to some lesser degree outfielders, that have not said that he improved their game and made them much more successful on the field. That's his reputation. This is sort of the antithesis. You had Baker coming in his 70s and taking over a really great team.
Yeah.
This is not that. This team is a train wreck. And unlike Oakland, who was also a train wreck, they've got no one in the pipeline. They literally traded all of their top prospects for rentals to try to keep Ohtani happy. And now they got nobody. So
that was a very foolish move for sure.
And this is what Washington's walking in. He deserves better. I think he'll still keep them trying. I think they'll be game for him, and no matter how bad they are, he's going to keep the clubhouse on a level keel, which is why they've brought him in, I think. But I feel bad that he's finally getting a shot to come back, and this is who he has to do it for.
We talked. Dave asked about big trades. There's a chance that he will also be doing this without Mike Trout, because I think he may go this year. It's going to be very hard because the fans will hate them, because now there'll be nothing left there. But it's possible Mike Trout goes as well. So a tough spot for him. We're gonna lose the. We're gonna go a couple minutes long because I want to talk about one other quick thing, but we're gonna lose the Roku audience here soon. So you guys tune in tomorrow morning for the college football huddle at 9 a.m. That we were live on Wednesday. It replays on Roku at 9 a.m. tomorrow. So check that out. And we appreciate you joining us. I'm going to stay a couple minutes longer because I want to dive into one more thing, kind of related to this managerial thing and getting second chances. The rumors with Mendoza in New York is that he wants Willie Randolph to be his bench coach. Speaking of bench coaches, and Randolph's considering it. I mean, he wasn't treated well by the Mets when they let him go, but this is a far different regime. That regime's all gone. In fact, one of the worst managerial firings in the history of managerial firings has got to be Willie Randolph. And I think it's interesting. I do hope he comes back. I mean, Willie's a good baseball man. Another guy that I do not understand has not gotten another opportunity. He did a great job with the Mets. The team, yes, had a couple of late season. You know, he got him to a playoff, got him to win a Carlos Beltran, keeping the bat on his shoulder for 3 straight pitches, going to a World Series, and then had a couple of late season collapses that hurt them and maybe hurt his reputation. I don't know. Why hasn't Willie Randolph gotten another chance? I don't understand it. Including the Yankees, by the way. Hello.
Well, the problem with these kinds of things is there's always stuff behind the scenes. You know, much the way there was with Counsell, where he didn't want to leave home, so it pretty much narrowed it down to 2, maybe 3 teams that he would have considered. We don't know if Randolph wants to stay in the area, and, you know, just that's a thing of his, so he's never really put his name in. We don't know. But you would have thought that, I mean, if the Showalters and the Williams, not the Williams, the guy in L.A., Washington, you know, if they're getting chances, then Randolph should have as well. I mean, but we don't know the reasons behind it.
A lot of guys who have done a lot of bad jobs that have been hired in the interim here. And I cannot believe Willie hasn't gotten a shot. I mean, it irks me, and I'd kind of gotten over it and passed it. And then his name came up in the news this week as being rumored. I'm like, bench coach, awesome, but why hasn't he been given another shot to manage? Did a great job.
And he'd actually make a good fit because, granted, Espada's been a bench coach, so he's been involved and can make his decisions. But there's, you know, like Vogt, where you want, let's bring on someone with experience that can inform your decisions. So he actually would make sense.
And Willie, by the way, if you do get a second job, please do yourself a favor. Do not put Jerry Manuel on your staff, because he will stab you on the back and you'll get fired while you're flying to the West Coast. So
well, that's up to Stearns now. So
right. Anyway, any last thoughts on? We still got the San Diego job open. Last I heard, you mentioned Ross earlier. I hadn't heard that. Last I heard, it was still between
Flaherty and Schilt.
Schilt. I can never say that, guys. I want to say Schlitz all the time when I see his name. And
I predicted Schilt a long time ago. You know, with Ross available, who knows? But he was a really good manager for the Cardinals, and just had another one of those, you know, differences of opinion with management things. He did not leave because he wasn't doing a good job.
No, I mean, they didn't do well in the postseason under him necessarily, but again, he did a good job compared to a lot of other guys. So he's another guy, deserves another shot. Again, this is a tough team to manage, though, man. I don't know if I'd want that job right now. But we'll see what happens there. Any last thoughts about anything we talked about today, or anything we should?
No, we didn't get to free agents, which
we will.
We would have liked, but again, without you need the full picture, and without the non-tenders who are then going to become free agents,
right, and
can alter the landscape a little bit, and that deadline is later tonight. Who gets contracts and who doesn't?
Oh, I thought it was next week. It's tonight. Okay.
Yeah, it's tonight, I think. So, then you really have the full field of free agents, and then you can start talking about, okay, who's going to compete? You got the top tier of pitchers pitching. Everyone wants pitching. Gee, that's so unusual. But now everyone really wants pitching. So, including teams that aren't even that good, like the Mets. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's hard to talk about landing spots with those because there are so many people in the mix for the same players.
And I'll say this, too, again, similar to the manager situation, until Ohtani drops, I mean, there's probably not going to be a lot of movement until one guy goes, and you're going to start to see a lot of dominoes fall. Maybe we'll get some movement during the winter meetings. I was looking for the date of the winter meetings, and I can't seem to find it here, but it's got to be coming up here in December, I would think.
Right.
Because it's usually early in December, I think, that they have the winter meetings for the owners. So that's when things usually start to heat up.
Yeah, that's when you see your trades. Actually, I don't think Ohtani is going to have that much of an effect on the market in that regard. I think he does for the West Coast teams, but I don't. I think all the other teams are going to figure they don't have a shot at him, and they're going to make their moves anyway.
That's possible. That's entirely possible. So it's a big list, and maybe we'll jump into it. We'll have some time. Maybe next week we'll do that, make some predictions. And I wanted to cover this stuff today, and give you a little more time to come up with your. We'll both have our bad predictions and see if any of them come through.
That's always entertaining.
I will not hedge on my Ohtani pick, though. He will be going to the San Francisco Giants if I have to drive him out there myself. Guys, I want to thank you for joining us today. Dave, thank you. Thanks for not bringing up Fire, Boone, and Cassie, because we all
did.
Did he mention it?
Yeah.
The comment. I see it so often, I must have missed it. I'm on the same page as you, Dave, I promise you. Guys, we'll see you next week right here with the Major League Baseball update at 3 p.m. next Friday. Join us then. Catch us Sunday with the Stream of Consciousness. And next Wednesday night, we'll have the college football huddle. So please check it out. We'll see you, whether you're watching us on Facebook, YouTube, whether you're watching us on TGI Sports Talk or Northeast Training Sports or Let's Talk Sports. Please like and follow all of those sites and ring the bell on YouTube if that's what you got to do. Have fun. Guys, have a great weekend. Enjoy the college football, and the baseball pins are about to fall. So, Drew, thank you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.